And what did you do? You had to make it tragedy porn. I'm so sick of it. Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're doing a book review for Ashley Hope Perez's book and the fourth book on the ALA's Banned or Challenged book list of 2021, Out of Darkness. But before we get started, I have some thoughts that we're gonna have to cover before we get into the review because, there are some things that came up. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. Number one way to be featured is through LMY, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give a prompt, you answer the prompt, and the first Monday video of the month is y'all's creativity. The second way to be featured is if you're an indie author and you have a book out or you have a book coming out, submit the first chapter and the cover down below, and they will be featured here on the channel for a read to hopefully help more readers find your work. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my works, they are linked down in the description below. You can find them anywhere you get books. And recently, an anthology that I was featured in has also been published called the Stygian Collection, where you can find 24 fantastic authors, possibly, you know, getting a little sampling and maybe finding some new favorites to check out. So that's also on my link tree down below if you want to take a look at that. With that said, let's get into this tragedy. I resisted so long actually reading this book. I say so long. It was like a week to a week and a half where I took a break between ALA books because I just could not bring myself to read this after reading the prologue, because I'm like, this is such a waste of time. Before we get into like the actual book, I want to posit a couple of questions that I would love to hear your guys' theories or thoughts on. So first things first, if my comments throughout this come off a little bit more scathing than normal, it is because I had the privilege of seeing the author targeting somebody who didn't want her book in schools. She used her YouTube channel, and it's kind of funny because having talked about authors behaving badly in previous videos, like how the response has been, because I don't do videos necessarily on authors behaving badly, but in talking about situations like that Three Rivers girl who had her book ruined because of how she responded to somebody who didn't like her book or who had liked her book but didn't give it 5 stars, it's interesting when an author gets away with it just fine. And that includes Ashley Hope Perez here, because she didn't get dogpiled on for mocking and featuring somebody who was not interested in her book. Here's an example.
Oh, Kara, I heard you had some concerns about a book in the library.
The book called Out of Darkness.
Darkness. This Out of Darkness? Looks like a historical novel by Ashley Hope Perez. Won an award. Hey, it was reviewed in the New York Times Book Review. This sounds great. Well, let's talk about it. Characters, setting, themes.
I don't want to have anal sex.
Okay, but about the book. Reading a book is a fun alternative to anal sex, and this one tackles racism, little known aspects of Texas history. Also, there's a love story.
One of the reasons that I'm probably going to be more scathing on this than some of the previous books is because Ashley Hope Perez fights that this book should be in schools because it's educational historically.
I didn't write Out of Darkness for Kara. I wrote it for brave, big-hearted readers ready to face some painful aspects of our country's history.
Because she wants to show racism as it historically was. However, you get to the author's note at the end of the book where she says she took a bunch of creative licenses in this, and she says, well, this would be the typical response to this sort of situation, so this thing didn't happen, but I changed it. But I wanted to write it this certain way in order to dramatize these sorts of lives and traumatize these sorts of people and make this sort of point, so I changed things. So, look, I understand historical fiction, and I understand taking historical context and fictionalizing things around it. That is a completely legitimate genre, and it's something that happens. I draw the line at you pushing a book should be in school because it teaches historical precedents when you made shit up. That's the issue here. You cannot say this needs to be in schools in order to teach children when stuff inside of it did not happen. I'm gonna have to trust you that if this is in a classroom somewhere, that you are not lying about circumstances and exaggerating. However, when your characters in this book, when your villainous female mean girl character, because of course all of the female characters either have to die or be bitches, because let's just hate on women forever, right? When your main female character, who is the bad guy, who is opposite to Naomi, comes in and she literally has a villainous entrance and she throws her head back cackling when she's like, that guy did it, go and get him, I hate him because of his race. Do not tell me that this is trying to be realistic, because it's not. Every single character in this book is an exaggerated caricature. From freaking Miranda, the cackling bitch, over there to Doug's Dimmadome, the owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome, being the version of their oil tycoon, okay? Everybody in here is an exaggeration. We're all white people bad, and then you've got Naomi and Wash, who are the model minorities. Nothing is wrong with them. They are the holiest of holy. Wash can do literally everything, while Henry sucks at literally everything, and Wash comes up behind him and fixes everything, because Wash has to be the most competent and Henry has to be the most incompetent, because he is evil in every sense of the way. And also, let's just make Henry incomprehensibly evil, yet somehow Naomi's mother found it worthy to marry that man. So like, fuck you. You could not even do a little bit of nuance in this story, because it's impossible. So don't tell me that this story needs to be in school for historical teaching. That's bullshit. So sorry if I'm a little bit... This goes back to my point of why am I already ranting when we haven't even talked about the story? Because this author is arguing that the story should be in schools for teaching history. Bullshit. This can be in bookstores just fine. This does not need to be used to teach history. Now finally getting into the story. Sorry about that. I told you there's some baggage with this story. But actually getting into the intro of what this book is, let me just say that I think it's a hate crime, and it reads very fetishistic. Poorly written, no point, no plot. Every character in here is a stereotype or a trope to the extreme. The author feels hateful, and it comes through in the way that she writes. Her character is not like other girls. She is the hottest thing that has ever walked this earth. Every female hates her. Everyone wants to have sex with her, even her own stepdad, to the point of him raping her at the end, to the point of him masturbating in front of her when she was only 5 years old, just after he had married her mother. And the girl hate continues with Miranda, the classmate, hating Naomi for no reason, possibly because Miranda is just a racist for no reason whatsoever. And even random nameless women who come into the bathroom to praise her twin siblings who look white also hate Naomi because she is to be the biggest victim. Even her own sister, who starts out with having no issues with her, suddenly has issues with her right before she dies, because fuck you, no girl gets through here unscathed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This book was number 4 on the ALA's Most Challenged and Banned Book of 2021 for depictions of abuse, and because it was considered to be sexually explicit. It dropped down to number 9 in 2022 for the same reasons, with only 50 challenges nationwide, just so you get an idea of the scope of what these challenges are. 50 to be number 9. I cannot imagine any kid picking up this book for fun or reading it the whole way through by choice, so my guess is that it is in classrooms somewhere and being taught as the history of what America racism was like, and it falsifies history by using a real event and saying this is what it was like. But using the inspiration of a real event as a backdrop or element of your book does not make it historical for teaching history. That's like saying a zombie book that takes place after Chernobyl is historical. This is just racism, oppression, bully fanfiction written by someone who only writes in the most egregious stereotypes with no willingness or ability to see nuance or write nuance. It'd be a lot less offensive if it wasn't being pushed as historical and for learning. This also came across to me as a savior complex fanfiction to finger wag at readers that your version of racism. This also came across to me as a savior complex fanfiction to finger wag at readers that your version of racism in Mean Girls is wrong, and it's 400 pages too long for being a plotless pile of racist tropes. We are going in a hot. So the prologue, now that all of that is out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the story and you can tell me your thoughts. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? Lord help you if you do. So the prologue opens up with a fairly graphic detailing of a search team inside of a destroyed building filled with disfigured and destroyed bodies of children in school. How there are so many bodies they have to speed up through the formaldehyde paint job and put out a call to all carpenters for child caskets. Then everybody in the city is at the various funerals thinking somebody needs to pay for what has happened to all of these children. Quote, a man squats and pulls away crumpled bricks under the blasted chunk of plaster. He finds a small hand missing 3 fingers. He places it in a basket and heaves the debris into a wheelbarrow. Farther down, in the tangle of woods and school books of concrete, he uncovers a bruised toe. Later, he finds a child's leg still sheathed in denim. Bent at the knee, it fit in the basket. Red Cross volunteers with white armbands stand at the edge of the work site and hand out cigarettes and sandwiches. They pour scorched coffee into paper cups as if nicotine, pimento cheese, and caffeine were any match for this horror. This is how you know that you're in for something grave, because we're starting with an explosion and a bunch of dead. Then it plays the moment of the explosion as it happens from a yard keeper and or odd job doer, Wash. He is eventually going to become a love interest for the main female character and a perspective character. But after introducing us to that explosion, it's rewind back a year before the explosion happens, because now we're going to lead up to the explosion. So this moves into a description of Beto and his sister Carrie and who they were. The two of them pick things up together so that they can share in the luck. They're starting at a new school. Theoretically, it's the one that is going to be destroyed later in the book. We meet their older sister, Naomi. Then we get to know Wash a little more, and he's just doing jobs for the school. The school doesn't let other kids in until the whites are done, and he's looking forward to meeting Naomi, the new person, because he likes women a lot, and he thinks that she is beautiful, and he is happy to have met her in the weird way that they met outside of school. The kids are now at school, meeting with their new teacher, and Wash heads home where we get a sample of his family life. We're mostly getting exposition now from where Wash, Naomi, and the twins have all come from. Naomi is possibly illegal, while her kid siblings are the children of her stepdad Henry and her mother, who is no longer with them. But theoretically, nobody cares about illegals in this town because people are coming and going all the time for oil reasons, because this is during the oil rush in 1936. It also turns out that Wash is both working for the school and also his parents hold him at high expectations for him and his siblings so that they go to college. Naomi will just be starting school here soon too, since she just moved here. She's not using her own name, none of them in her family are, and she finds that a disgrace to her ancestors. Naomi gets to class, showing up for the first time, and everyone is like, ooh, she's Mexican. Our first Mexican in class ever. Holy cow. They want to look at her tits, and the boys all like the idea of her pussy. Quote, a couple of the guys, Chicker Watson and his pimpled hands, and also Josiah Pleaton, were of the private opinion that even if Tommy talked too much and had some bacon on her, she did have tits. But most of us just wish that she would move out of the way, especially now since we wanted to get a better look at the Mexican girl who had missed the first 2 days of school. Those of us in the back could see reported to those in the front. Clothes and dirt and sandals for the girls, for the boys, pussy, or the idea of pussy, or the idea of pussy. And after we get that introduction, immediately we get someone is going to be a meanie. Quote, even the girls had to admit that, Mexican or not, old clothes or not, she was prettier than any girl in school. Elliot Governor whistled. Dot Miller hissed back. Go on, catch yourself a disease. Some of us could be jealous, and the greenest of all was Miranda Gibbler. None of us liked Miranda, all of us pretended to. She was ugly and had spite enough to poison the whole town. But what mattered was her daddy's money. A Mexican is a Mexican is a Mexican, she said, plenty loud for the rest of us to hear. The girls among us followed Miranda's lead and began to tally the flaws. The boys are all thinking about wanting to have sex with Naomi immediately. Quote, the boys among us had no trouble getting past the plain clothes and laying down plans. Take her out back, we boys figured. Then, hands on her titties, put it in the coin box, put it in the cornhole. Grab a hold of that braid, rub that calico. The nicer boys among us thought, buy her an ice cream first, dance with her once or twice. Switch over then to Beto's POV, where he is at a church sermon where everyone is being told that they're going to hell. Now come on and praise. I feel like that I need to prepare for the author's worst stereotypes at this point to be ready for the misery porn that is going to be in this book. The pastor is going on about how all of the sinners will burn. What should I think about the explosion in the beginning? Is they're all going to burn? Is this a statement about how everybody, all of the children in that school are all sinners because they're white and racist and so they're burning in hell? Because the pastor more or less says that when talking to Beto's dad later. We'll get to that. Now, Naomi's family is meeting with the pastor at the church. Some lady is talking to them, but obviously doesn't really like them, and they don't really like the church people back. They're just getting on to get on. Naomi is watching over her kids' siblings at church and avoiding the church people because she doesn't want to talk to them and finds them annoying, intrusive, and probably racist. Quote, Naomi watched the twins play until some of the church ladies started drifting in her direction. She did not want to meet another Miss Glenda Faye Hawkins or Miss Susanna Sally Peters, had no desire to face their smiles and clucking and gloved hands. Some inquired about Italians in her mother's family. Others did not, but their faces were pinched with the strains for not asking, not saying. She considered waiting for Henry's truck, away from the dressed-up chickens that would peck and peck at her until they found something tasty. Naomi resents that no one wants to listen to what she wants. Abuelito assures Naomi that she will go to the big school where she will be mixed with the white kids and have better opportunities and a better education than if she stayed with Abuelito, even if it meant that she would be separated from the whites in 5 dank and crowded basement rooms. She doesn't want to go to the bigger school, and she doesn't want to be around her stepdad Henry anymore. Probably because I'm getting assaulted vibes from her, and that is correct, by the way. She listens to Abuelito and Abuelita. So Naomi makes the deal to go and live with her stepdad Henry, who sexually assaulted her as a child, and she is told nobody about it. And I don't know, I really still do not understand why this situation happened, because there's no logic to it. Then we get another exposition dump about who Naomi's mother was and how she relates the braid to her mother. She has like a severed braid of her mother's that she pets and keeps in a little chest when she feels lonely and she wants to feel close to her mother. One of the many disasters include the first time Henry got Estella, the mother, pregnant, when she had the baby on the floor and it died there. Then Henry came back. Naomi's told that this happens to every woman. It also details how Naomi listened to Henry rape her mother through the wall, and she listened to her mother cry through the wall at night. Then we go back to the picnic where Naomi and Henry are walking along the river, and she's just thinking about the bad things that Henry has done and how he was baptized, and quote, if he's been born once again, what was to say that he couldn't be born again a second time, back into his old ways? She returns to the picnic area and talks to some of the little girls who think that the tortillas she brought are pancakes, and so they call her dumb for bringing pancakes to supper. She's upset and leaves. Side note, I have a hard time believing that any of these kids do not recognize what a tortilla looks like in southern Texas. Like, this just felt too much to be hateful. You'll also notice that the story is very jumpy in what it does. It's very like vignettes more than a cohesive storyline, because the characters here don't have motivations. None of them have motivations, so the only thing to really do is like peek into these vignette scenes and exposition dump trauma. So Naomi is now in a store where she's accosted by some white people saying that she doesn't belong there. It's a white person grocery store. It's the white people only hour, so she's chased out to come back later when it's okay for her kind to be there. Wash sees her and chases after her. He tries talking to her, but she's crying and gets defensive. Then, before they get into too much conversation, her kid siblings run up. They introduce each other, the twins want to go fishing with Wash, and Naomi lets them go, but goes home by herself because she wants to be alone. Wash wants to go after her. I'm getting some insta-love vibes from this situation. As you go forward, you'll see that there was really nothing between them. It was really just insta-love to make them like each other, with nothing really behind it, which kind of cheapens the love story that this is supposed to be. Now that Naomi is back at her house, she's looking at the $5 bill she was given to get groceries with, thinking about how she'd never seen one before, and also how Wash had seen her crying. She thinks about grabbing the twins and running away, but there's not enough money, and she can't make a scene of any kind at school because she fears that if Henry knows the people at school see her as colored, that Henry might take the twins and abandon her. I don't know how she thinks the people at school aren't going to see her as colored, because immediately from the moment she walks in, they're like, you're Mexican. Like, immediately. This book tries to play this line of being both, she passes as white, but she's also Mexican, but eventually later they go, she can pass as black. And so it just wants to use the identity as it's convenient, as opposed to what is actually solid for this character. Naomi wanders around the house and into Beto's room where she's just looking at things. Back to Beto at the pond with his sister and Wash, they return home with some fish. The kids go inside, Wash and Naomi talk to each other, and he's admiring how beautiful she is. He promises her that he'll help her get good groceries so Mr. Turner doesn't dupe her. He's thinking of a previous girl who he had slept with, or at least he's talking about what her nipples look like, and that she's in choir, and he's not really interested in her anymore because he wants to be with Naomi because Naomi is absolutely better. She is way more beautiful than that stupid choir girl. I was at this point just going, what is the point of this chapter? Is it just thinking about Naomi and white people and the difference between them? Next, we're talking about how Beto is a good reader and likes reading, and Wash shows up to take them to Egypt Town where they visit a candy store, and the shop owner tells her to be careful about getting to know folks in this town. The gang at school are all interested in Naomi still. By gang, I just mean there's a perspective that's literally just a groupthink of the boys. So they're interested in her, but they don't really want to talk to her because they're afraid that Miranda will hate them if they show any interest in Naomi. But the narrative is still the boys at school gossiping about how poor Naomi is, that she doesn't have a mother, that they have learned about her through church gossip, and she was washing clothes in the bathtub wearing nothing but a sleeping gown, and that when she got all wet, you could see everything. And while they're just talking about how dirty Mexicans are, like ad nauseum, because that's what this does. And this goes into them talking about how dirty they think Mexicans are ad nauseum, because that's all that this really does. They gossip about her relationship to the white kids, which are her kid siblings, as she watches them. And the gossip also says they figure she's part black and that her dad is not her dad. And they are also talking about her because it gives them something better to talk about than any of the boring people at school. Maybe they even take something away from talking about her being poor and miserable and an outcast. I was kind of getting vibes of like Piccola from The Bluest Eyes, where that neighborhood liked to gossip and talk about Piccola because it made them feel better, and that's sort of what I got here as well. Quote, "We needed the Mexican girl, each in our own way. She gave us something to do. She kept us thinking how to get rid of her, Miranda, how to stay clear of her, the other girls, and how to get in her, the boys." Then we're back to Naomi having dinner with Henry and her family, and he's asking about what the kids have been up to. He saw them with Wash. Naomi tries to tell Henry how Wash and the kids like hanging out with each other, but Henry doesn't want them to hang out with Wash because he's black. Then he's talking about gross jokes that they tell at the oil rig, inappropriate for ladies to hear, and the pastor would be so mad if he heard them. But Naomi, give me your hands so that we can pray and be holy together. I don't get the point of him bragging about this again, other than to make him look slimy. In my opinion, this was so heavy-handed, it's not even funny. Like, the hatred I'm feeling from this book toward the stereotypes this author has created specifically to paint groups of people with it's mind-numbing. We skip then to Naomi laying in bed with her siblings. It's raining, and a long description of laying in bed thinking of people sleeping. Skip forward to more exposition, a second disaster with Naomi's mother. She's bleeding again in the bathroom somewhere. This is her second miscarriage. Naomi is sent to go and find Henry somewhere because he's sleeping around with other women in town somewhere, and because, of course, everyone in this book that isn't Wash or Naomi related is a sleazebag in every single way. So, like, the women that are in the same building with Henry as he's sleeping with other women on his wife are just giggling about him cheating on Naomi's mom when she goes to pick him up. Naomi finds Henry, brings him back home. Then we get like a 2-sentence vignette of a third miscarriage where Naomi's mom is warned that the next one might be fatal for her health. This just results in Henry being pissed off, and he's told to have less sex with his wife or something. Quote, Naomi's English was getting better, but she did not know what was meant by abstinence, substitution, self-care, or prophylactics. Whatever it was made Henry very angry. "She's my wife, damn it. A man's got a right," he said. We're so over the top with these styles of characters that I'm like, I don't care, author. I'm not going to care about your characters. You don't care about your characters, and you just want to hurt them. So, like, go away. This book is a waste of time. I have no patience for this. But also, this blurb specifically about the wife and the miscarriage, it feels ill-fitting for the time period. Self-care? Was that really language in 1936? Then we go to some random scene where Naomi had just moved into Henry's house, and she's thinking about how she likes to bathe in his house because his bathtub is so big. She's floating in the warm water all by herself when Henry just walks in, jacks off, and then walks out. There was no point to the scene. Now we're back to modern times with Wash as he's talking to someone named Cal about a guy named Blue who used to be social. Then he went away and moved into the woods where he took more food than he needed for himself, and they figured it was because he wanted to hide some girl that he got in Louisiana. Someone went up to the cabin that he was hiding in to see what was going on and found that Blue did in fact have a white woman in the woods. This makes Wash start getting a boner thinking about Blue banging a white woman. So then this kid named Dusty, who was the one that went up to the cabin, was spreading around that Blue had a white chick in the woods, but nobody knew whether or not to believe him saying that because Dusty was a kid. Cal then continues he has no idea how the white folk in town found out that Blue had a white girl, though he had just said that Dusty was running around gossiping and telling everybody that he could possibly tell that Blue had a white chick. Anyway, the white people in the town got pissed when they heard about this and went to the cabin in the woods, then hung Blue up and stuck his balls in his mouth as revenge or something. Back with Naomi, Henry has taken her and the twins out to the drill oiling site for some reason we're never given. They just are there. A guy from church named Gilbert approaches and gives Naomi his jacket because it's cold outside. Then he proceeds to talk to her. Oil Springs and the oil tycoon Doug Dimmadome shows up, as well as Miranda, because that's her father, and she runs over to Gilbert, gives him a hug, and flirts with him because he is also one of the hottest boys in town. Obviously, her dad is a fat guy with a gut so big that he can't keep it in his shirt. The buttons on his shirt are like popping off, and despite being rich, he can't get a fitting shirt. Here we get one of the few scenes with Miranda where it's just outlining more how she's a petty, bitchy girl stereotype. Miranda is the daughter of one of the richest oil tycoons in town. She's the most jealous girl in school, insulting Naomi at every turn, picking on Naomi, saying that she's so dark that she couldn't be seen. Oh, and was she so poor that she left her clothing, her own jacket, back in Mexico, telling Gilbert to wash his jacket after Naomi has been wearing it because otherwise there might be diseases on it. She also tells Naomi that Gilbert's friends call him by a certain nickname to prove that she's not Gilbert's friend, but Miranda is Gilbert's friend. Like, think of every stereotypical behavior you can imagine for this to go down in this scene, and the author uses it. This is just the laziest writing I've ever seen, using political means to protect it. So Naomi eventually excuses herself because she's tired of being shit on by Miranda and goes to talk to someone named Tommy. Tommy informs her that Miranda has been interested in dating Gilbert since last year when he was star of The Quarterback, but his dad was concerned about this and didn't think that he was good enough for Miranda, so Doug Dimmadome told Gilbert to stay away from his daughter unless he wanted his career ruined and his scholarships taken away from him. So Gilbert stopped pursuing Miranda, but for some reason Miranda is still pursuing Gilbert. Make it make sense. It doesn't. It's just another way to victimize Naomi while also keeping Miranda from getting anything that she wants. Like, it's so stupid. There is no logic behind it. So now Naomi is back in class, and Miranda, of course, is tormenting her at school for having been in Gilbert's jacket. She can't run away from this situation even though she wants to. Like, she can't leave Henry's house. She can't leave this school because she promised Abuelito that she would stay in the school for a better opportunity, at least until graduation, and she has to take care of the twins. Miranda apparently is also the one who taught Naomi to lie about girl problems, if you know what I mean, so that male teachers would let her hide in the bathroom all day. Some women come into that bathroom and start talking about how amazing Naomi's siblings are before obviously insulting Naomi because we have to call her probably retarded and definitely a slut, while her siblings are better than her because they look white. Henry is now hanging around the house more. Naomi calls it playing daddy, and she is seeing Wash even more now when she gets the chance. She talks about how she's getting a B+ in school now, which is the highest grade she's ever gotten. Then she's on her way to her friend Tommy's house. Skip over to Wash approaching someone and being given a bread roll, flirting by saying, "This what you do for your sweethearts?" We're not told who this is. She's just she the whole time, not described, given no setting, nothing, which is bizarre and jarring when we were somewhere else entirely in a previous scene, and then we just skip over to this scene with completely different people at a completely different time, and we're not told who he's with. Then suddenly we're hanging out with the twins and Wash and eating a pie. Surprise, nothing happens in this chapter again. Naomi goes to pick up the twins as they're hanging out with Wash. She's hiding in the bushes, keeping watch on them. The twins head home without Naomi because she never made herself known, and she continues to watch Wash as he goes into the house and comes back out with a pretty girl hanging off his arm, laughing. Naomi goes running away, crying, because she's like, he's seeing somebody, and somebody prettier than me and better than me, and clearly this is a miscommunication trope, because let's Let's layer in every single lazy trope that we possibly can in this book. Naomi is angry and upset and being mean to her brother because she's in a bad mood. I just could not believe that we randomly inserted the miscommunication trope when we had nothing else going on anyway. I don't understand how this book is so highly rated. So now it's November, and Henry is coming into the twins' room because Carrie is vomiting. Naomi says that Carrie is pregnant, and I didn't understand why that statement was made because Carrie was not pregnant. And that never comes up again. But Naomi said it. And then she says it's just a stomach bug like 2 seconds later, so it'll be better in a couple of days. Henry is sent off to go and get crackers, where he talks to the clerk at the store and learns that Naomi had only been shopping there that once before being chased out, and the clerk apologizes because he hadn't known that Naomi belonged to Henry's family. Henry wonders where the food has been coming from then if she hasn't been going to Turner's. Henry gets home and talks about fixing a radio that they have. Naomi smells whiskey and beer on Henry and says that he likes that combo. And then she closes her eyes against the memories that are flooding her because he smells like alcohol. Henry fixes the radio. The kids wake up to play with it. It breaks again, and Henry gets mad, saying that he just wants his life to work out, and then he storms off. Wash shows up and offers Naomi some fish that he caught out in the lake. She has no food, and Henry's away, so she accepts the fish from Wash, even though she's still mad at him, and then she goes back inside. Henry is sleeping by the river, apparently to avoid the 6 kids. The pastor chastises him for not taking care of the children, and then he heads back home. Back with Naomi, she's cooking donuts and then gets startled when she sees the pastor on the other side of the window. She ends up accidentally spilling hot oil on herself as she has been cooking donuts. The twins come and help her put her arm under cold water, and then they get ready for school. Pastor sits down with Naomi, tells her that I found your dad by the river, told him to come home, so he should be home momentarily. And that's really the end of like that entire scene. For the rest of the book, the burn or the burn scar only comes up like once or twice. It makes no difference to the entire rest of the story, but it does give Miranda another thing to mock Naomi for, and that's pretty much the only reason it exists, is to further victimize Naomi. Is that really necessary? Ashley, for real? Can you see why I'm like just... This book made me so angry with how lazy the author was. Anyway, we're meeting with Wash again after school when he fishes. Are we not mad at him anymore, or is it just dropping the twins off? Because even though Naomi is mad at him, she's still dropping the twins off constantly. She tries to hide her burn from Wash, but he sees it. She goes home, leaving the twins with Wash, and then sews clothing together. Henry comes in to hang out. He's bothering Naomi about where she's getting her food from if it's not the Turners. Then he's pissed that she's getting it from a store for non-white people. Henry's taking over buying food since he can't trust Naomi, and then they're going to go and get a cat for the twins because the twins wanted a cat. The twins name the cat Edgar. Henry gets home, and now it's time to go find Naomi because she is not there. Back at school, Naomi and her classmates are given an assignment to make a dress. Naomi and Tommy are making plans to go to the city to go look at dresses that they could possibly make for their project. If you think this synopsis is jarring and bouncing around everywhere, that's because this book is doing the same thing and it's nonsensical. Scenes happen for no purpose. They just feel like hanging out. They just feel like fan fiction moments. It is literally nobody is doing anything but hanging out. With it feeling like the author being like, what can I have them spend time doing? I don't freaking know. Time skip forward some more, and the kids come in cold while Naomi is cooking. She's thinking about the woman that she saw at Wash's house because every day since he saw her burn, he's been sending her gifts. But now what? We're gonna do the whole, she looks at all of these gifts and goes, well, he doesn't really like me. Not really. It's just a game, right? Because we need that trope on top of the miscommunication trope where they're not even talking, right? The twins are asking about getting a turkey for Thanksgiving. Naomi asks Henry about getting coats for the kids because it's getting cold outside, and he gives her money. He then gives her permission to go and have turkey dinner at Tommy's house because he doesn't really want to celebrate Thanksgiving. Now Naomi goes shopping with Tommy. They get a coat, they get ice cream. Katie, who is some random from their class, who is never mentioned before and I don't think gets mentioned again, asks Naomi if she knows any dirty Mexicans, since she is Mexican, but she's not a dirty one, and she wants to know if they even exist. End of scene. Yeah, I don't know. This book is so dumb in everything that it does. There's no love story here. Everything is just piling on racism and bullying, victimizing these characters. For what reason? So that the author can finger wag at you about her saviorism? Get out of here. I'm just kidding. I'm just getting angry again, reading the synopsis and being taken back to this story. Out of darkness, more like out of patience. Now the donut burn is healing. Confirmed no reason for it to even exist because it only came in that one scene for Wash to see it and her to hide it, and then for Miranda to make fun of her for being even more ugly because Naomi is super hot. And so, of course, the insecure rich woman needs another reason to make fun of the Latina hottie. Naomi apparently has this tree in the woods where she goes out to think and hide in it, and so that's where she is now. In order to stop herself from picking at the scab on her arm where the donut burn is, she puts her hands between her thighs. Then she starts masturbating while thinking of Wash. Why? That's just where it decided to go. You thought, oh, donut burn, this is itchy, I'm not gonna scratch it. Oh, my hands are down there. I guess I'm just gonna... I told you, these authors need to be mentally evaluated for competency because there's no reason for this. Now we're gonna switch over to Wash, who is trying to resolve how they're all so cold at his house. And he starts thinking about Naomi and how she's giving him the cold shoulder. He says, I don't know why she's doing this to me other than we have no business really starting anything since we're not really involved. Then he spits into his hand and he also masturbates while thinking of her. It even says that they've got nothing going on, but she's worth holding out for. They don't have a relationship. There is no reason for him to even have an interest in her other than he thinks that she's hot. And then why do we suddenly have these two chapters where they're just introduced to internally monologue and then masturbate? I don't know why we're here. You don't need to put this in a teen book, let alone randomly in a storyline. Sex does not need to be randomly inserted into storylines just to be there. And let alone, it doesn't need to be in a book that is going into schools that some places are trying to sue to get back into schools. If you do this and you pretend that there is nothing wrong with this about what you are doing, you are a nefarious groomer. Because you are hiding this shit. Now, after the masturbation scenes, which didn't have anything to do with anything, Naomi is cleaning the house and goes into Henry's room, sees that he has guns, including a revolver, and that's only good for killing people. Also, she finds Ramsey's and Romeo's, whatever those were, and then says that those could have saved her mom's life. Also, a picture of her mom on her wedding day with regret in her eyes like she knew that she had already made a mistake. Naomi leaves the room and holds her mother's braid, stroking it and praying as she remembers it's her job to keep her siblings safe. You'd think if that was her job, she would take the siblings away to go live with her grandparents. She goes to pick up the kids from Wash's house again and tells him to stay away from them from now on. He asks why. She says that it's because he's a liar and he says that he's never lied to her. She mentions the chick leaving his house. Wash smiles. Naomi thinks about how destructive men are, leaving the people who loved them wrecked or dead, and thinking of what's probably sexual abuse that Henry did to her. Wash says that girl was blind and came over to play piano because she doesn't have one at her own house. Wash then gives the kids money to go and get candy so that he can talk to Naomi alone. The two of them disappear into the woods to their very special tree where it's alluded that they have sex. This is nondescript beyond she comes out of herself as he is doing things to her. Some might say he ruined her in that YA way because this is definitely a scene where it's described as he basically ruined me. Naomi is assured that the gun Henry has is probably for the oil fields because those are dangerous and things had been rough before the women came along. And for the rest of this time now, Wash and Naomi are hooking up every chance that they get. Now we skip through the Christmas dinner just so that Henry can be in a bad mood when he's asked about family. Then they head home to open gifts as a family. The twins got Naomi a jewelry box and were reminded of how Naomi has no jewelry because she's poor and her dad hates her. Turns out Henry did get Naomi something, which was fabric so that she could make herself a dress. It is the same sort of fabric that Naomi thinks my mother was buried in a yellow dress. Then Henry is off to work because he doesn't want to hang out with the family anymore and would prefer work to his family on the holiday. Little sister Kari asks Naomi what she's supposed to do with the doll that Henry gave her for Christmas because Henry can't even pick out Christmas gifts correctly. He can't be good at anything, and nobody likes him. Then Naomi's reflecting on when she was given a baby doll by Henry when she was just 5 years old and how she envied that little doll because it would get to do things that she couldn't do because the doll was white and she was brown. Fortunately, so at this point in the story, I was concerned that the twins were actually the children of Naomi and Henry. Fortunately, that's not how this went, but that was a thought that I had while reading at this point. Once the three of them are done opening gifts, they are waiting to see Wash. Naomi is in her special tree, waiting for him, hungry for his touch. The kids get cold, so they head home, but now Wash is in the tree, and the two horny teens do what two horny teens do. The Christmas gift that the twins put together for Wash and Naomi was actually a Christmas ornament with all four of them drawn in it as if they were a family. You know, talking about how perfect they are and how much Henry doesn't need to be involved in anything because everybody freaking hates Henry. Then Wash gives Naomi a ring, and she's like, oh my gosh, we are like a real family. It fills her with joy and despair because, quote, the gesture brought her a longing coupled with the despair. They couldn't have that. Not in this world, no matter how much they loved each other. No explanation is given about how or why they can't be together. It's just, we can't be together. Doesn't everybody at school already hate you, Naomi? Just like, can we build something? There is a lot of implied you should already know what's going on here or why there's discrimination, but it doesn't build anything. And if everybody already hates Naomi, then why would they care if she hooks up with somebody else that they're also racially discriminating against? After Wash gives his gift to Naomi, Naomi gives hers to him, which was hidden under her clothing. They wanted to get frisky then, but couldn't. So they take their gifts and say goodbye. I bet Henry's gonna find that ring and freak out at some point. Plot twist, he actually doesn't find the ring, so the whole purpose of the ring is kind of stupid. Nothing means anything here. Skip forward to Naomi making a dress out of the fabric that Henry gave her, and Beto appears saying that it's cursed and that she should throw it away since it's the same color of the dress that his mother died in. Or was buried, that his mother was buried in. And Naomi says that's rude to say, and I wonder if she dies or gets raped in that dress. We'll find out. Again, I don't think that she actually is, but it sets up all of these things to be tied in later and then doesn't use them. Naomi is then making food, and Beto asks if he can help. Henry shows up and says cooking is women's work. Go toughen up before I drown your freaking cat. Because, of course, Ashley not only hates her characters and every white Texan, she also hates the reader and wants us tortured. Now, they're at some random bonfire, and Gilbert hits on Naomi again, saying that she's beautiful and there's nothing wrong with being a Mexican. Naomi keeps saying that she's not like other girls and she's not interested in Gilbert, but she'll be his friend. Wash and Naomi then meet in the tree nearby and kiss into the new year. Now at a meeting at the school for the next day, Wash is listening to Mr. Gibbler refuse to help anyone with all of the money that he's got. He's continually described as how gross he is, so that you know that he's gross, with his long jiggling jowls. Wash eventually snaps at Mr. Gibbler for not doing anything because they want the money for better or more supplies for the non-white schools, and saying that the non-white schools will actually help the white people by giving better conditions to the non-whites. Outside of the meeting, Wash's dad grabs him and goes, "What the frick were you doing in there? You're not convincing anyone to help you by yelling at the white people." And Wash is like, "We're dealing with cold-hearted people here. It would take an explosion to wake them up." Wash kind of holds it against his father for not speaking up, but then is like, maybe it's harder to break out a feeling like you need to work for these people than he thought. It's so contrived why none of these people literally do anything, and what forces anybody to move forward or even speak. Speaking of which, random half a page of the gang's POV just to show how jealous Miranda is of Naomi because she wants Naomi's freedom and doesn't like Naomi got Gilbert's interest. Now she's spreading rumors about Naomi. We're going back to Naomi, who is doing laundry, and Wash comes over, fixes the radio that Henry failed to fix. Wash and Naomi are perfect and everyone else around them sucks. Just so you know, the narrative wants to hammer it in. Also, Naomi just wants to have sex. Wash leaves after hanging out and listening to music and fixing the radio. The twins tell Naomi that Henry is working late, so they want to listen to music longer and watch Naomi dance like their mother in their mother's dress. She agrees after making them agree to stay out of the guitar case. That is a special guitar case. So now they're all making tortillas together, and Naomi is talking about their mother, dreading the day that she's shared all of the memories she has of the mother with the twins, because then she'll have none left for herself anymore. She also mentions how the pans Henry got are cheap, so that they don't really cook the tortillas right, because everything that Henry does is wrong. Fuck you. Like, I hate the author more than anybody in this book because of how much she hates her own characters and wants to victimize Naomi for everything she does. We're only like halfway through the book and I'm so tired of everything being complaining. I don't feel sorry for you. It just feels like the author being a cheap manipulator. And then I see her in her video shit talking a mother at a council meeting. And I'm like, it makes sense. It makes sense the kind of person you are. I told you, I'm in a mood today. That doesn't even need to be in here. I can't stand the way that this author is in this book. She is a cheap manipulator. Henry eventually gets home and everyone gets tense. He picks up some tortillas, sits down, and eats them with the kids. Skip to a scene of Henry and Estella dancing together, and he is super into her. Then, after they get married, he told her to stop dancing sexy and stop dressing sexy, because of course he did. And then, back to the current time, where Henry offers to put the kids to bed, and then he comes back. He tells Naomi that He tells Naomi that she can keep wearing her mother's dress. It's fine. He likes looking at her like that. Naomi remembers a time when Henry came home and tossed a bunch of lovingly made Mexican food onto the floor and demanded Estella make disgusting boiled carrots and bacon, which, because white people food is gross and every other kind of food is fine. I can't with this. Oh my God. The hatred, the level of disdain in this writing. Henry asks Naomi to sit with him while he eats, and then he talks about how he's thought about leaving this business and going somewhere else. Saw a guy catch on fire at work because he was covered in oil, and Henry is just not about that life. He says something about luck that makes Naomi go, I thought finding God meant that you didn't believe in luck anymore, and he's like, Pastor Tom doesn't know everything. Random interjection of Henry's backstory. Go back to the table where Naomi's not wanting to anger Henry while she washes the dishes. Henry goes to the bathroom. Naomi pulls her hair out of the ponytail that it's in. Henry comes back and is calling her Stella and getting all up in her business in a sexual way. She keeps telling him to stop, and he keeps pressing into her, keeps calling her Stella, and then says Naomi because he doesn't actually think that she is Stella. He says, your mom liked to pretend to fight me too. He says that he'll let her go if she says Henry again. She says Henry and he lets her go and sinks to the floor. She goes to her room where the twins are and hides. She waits for Henry to go to bed before she cleans herself up and is thinking about how horny she feels after what just happened in the kitchen. Quote, despite the cold, there was a familiar heat in her armpits and between her thighs. Maybe fear and desire ran along the same tracks in her body, but she refused to confuse Wash's giving with Henry's taking. After that, we get more confirmation that yeah, he used her sexually when she was younger. Next day, the pastor comes over to talk to Henry about the drinking that he saw last night. Henry is like, I saw bad things at work and I needed to drown it out, okay? You can't hold it against me that I didn't want to think about a man that caught on fire. Naomi's thinking that dirty, nasty man hasn't changed at all, pastor, but she doesn't say anything because she doesn't want to out him, because nobody in this book actually has any sense of self-preservation or self-motivation. Naomi is panicked all weekend about Henry trying something and hides behind the door with a letter opener clutched in her hand. At school, she's too tired to pay attention and gets in trouble, and the entire class mocks her for being stupid and lazy. The teacher doesn't stop it because part of the punishment, I guess. The teacher doesn't stop it because that's part of her punishment, I guess, and nobody cares. Skip to her being in the tree with Wash, and he's asking her if something happened, and she says no. I don't understand why she doesn't say anything and just runs away, especially with the twins, especially when she already knows that this stuff is going down. It's so stupid and contrived and forced, and none of these characters have any reason to be where they still are, except for the author needs them to be where they are. Wash tells Naomi about a secret African method of falling asleep, which is putting brown sugar on your tongue and then masturbating until you fall asleep, and tells her that she should try it. End scene. Skip forward again to the twins. They're arguing about not wanting to go to bed. They'll eventually go to bed though. Here we get another peek into why Naomi isn't trying to do anything. She doesn't want to. That is, she's thinking about how the twins are growing up and then one day they won't need her anymore, and she's scared about that because if the twins don't need her, then what reason would she have to stay here? Is she would have to come up with her own future plans. She falls asleep against her will, and she hates sleeping because her dreams scare her. She dreams of Wash and her mom sitting at a kitchen table talking to each other. Henry is on the other side of the window watching. She wakes up in a cold sweat because Henry woke her up. She was late for making breakfast. She feeds him and forgives him for what he did the other night, but she curses herself because she didn't mean to forgive him, and then Henry goes to bed. Henry is also over here grinning as he basically leers at Naomi because he knows what he did the other night and wasn't so drunk that he doesn't remember, because of course he likes it. We get half a page entry from Henry's point of view as he takes Naomi's slip from her bedroom, jacks off, and thinks about how he has to do this because Naomi is just so freaking hot. Then he goes to bed. Now it's just Naomi teaching Wash how to speak Spanish and flirting. Literally nothing is happening. Tommy and Naomi are doing homework as they sew their dresses, and Tommy is admiring how wonderful and generous Henry is. Now we're at church and a baptism is going to happen. Pastor takes Naomi aside and tells her that Henry is trying to change and that the church is good for the kids. Naomi says nothing. Skip over to Naomi and Wash first basing it by the river. They get started being physical and then Naomi is like, you know, we can't. And then he keeps going and she wants it. The description here is explicit, so the ALA saying it's just claimed as a lie. Wash gives Naomi head, then stops because as long as she is happy, he's happy. Again, this feels like specifically a women writing men trope. Rysand does the same exact thing and so many other freaking fetish fictions that I've read. If you know, you know. There's also somebody that says giving female head is feminism. Now Henry is taking the man out shooting, including Beto. So Naomi is hanging out with Wash, looking at the clouds. Now she's peeling potatoes for dinner, and Muff notices that she's distracted and probably is in love. Muff is like, no one is gonna stop you from getting married to Henry. If that's who you're in love with, you should just do it. For a bit, Naomi thought that Muff had been onto her and Wash. Muff's over here saying that it's totally fine if you marry your stepfather because you're not related, so it's like nothing, even if he raised you since you were 5 years old. Naomi agrees that she has a crush on Henry because she doesn't want anyone to know that she and Wash have a thing going on. Then she asks if this was Pastor Tom's idea, and Muff is like, well, of course he knew. He kind of figured that you two had a thing going on. I mean, look at you. Go over to Henry shooting guns with Beto and the boys, and Henry is insulting Beto for being a little sissy. He calls Beto a queer, even though that's not really language that they were using at that time period, and if he wants to claim historical accuracy, it's probably not. Beto wets himself, and then he cries about shooting a bird and runs off. When they get home, Carrie comforts Beto and helps him get to sleep. Now, super speed a whole section of Henry just lusting over Naomi everywhere he goes, because the conversation with Muff basically did a turn it on how horny he is for Naomi in the narrative, because now that's been dropped, so gotta start putting it in there somewhere instead of building it into the storyline overall. It is now Wash's birthday, and the twins give Wash papier-mâché body parts for a scarecrow for his mom's garden. Naomi is so turned on by Wash that they get rid of the kids to make out in their sex tree. Everyone at school is now gossiping that Naomi is probably banging her dad or someone on the football team. Why are they all so chill about she's banging her dad, though? It doesn't make any sense to me. Miranda takes it personally that Naomi seems happy just because Naomi is not allowed to be happy and Miranda just has to be angry. Because Naomi is happy, for some reason, Miranda goes on a fishing date with some guy that she doesn't even like and she hates the outdoors. Contrived as it is the only reason for her to be here is so that she can see Wash in the forest while she is fishing, and then she can see Naomi and Wash together. That is the only reason that these two people are out fishing together, when Miranda would never be caught dead fishing with how it is described. It also makes absolutely no sense why she would be out with this random loser named Chigger when she wants to go out with Gilbert. Why her father butt into her relationship with Gilbert, because her father would have been like, you're gonna make my daughter happy, and if you don't, then I'll make sure that your scholarship sucks. Like, why would her dad let her go out with a loser named Chigger, who she doesn't even like? But he would not let her go out with the hottest guy in school and in church, Gilbert, and would threaten him. This whole story is bullshit to make Miranda look like a pathetic wench who can't get anything, but is also somehow the most evil and the most miserable and hates other people's happiness when other people are standing in her way of happiness. Like, she isn't doing any of this to herself. It's such bullshit. If she can't go out with Gilbert, she is not going out with the loser in her class. I'm sorry, it doesn't make any sense. But the author just wants to humiliate Miranda because fuck you. So March comes around and Henry tells Naomi that they should get married. He says that God has sanctified this. Naomi says she doesn't want it. Pastor Tom asks how it went when Henry sees him next, and Henry is like, well, Pastor, it didn't go great. My daughter told me no, she doesn't want to marry me. The pastor is like, take time, ask her again later. You know, maybe it's just not the right time. Build the relationship a little more than ask again. And Henry is like, I don't want to freaking waste time like that. Naomi is like, I need to tell Wash about the proposal that my dad did at me, but dang it, he's so busy making that scarecrow with the twins, there is no possible way that I could actually talk to Wash. You know, there's no way that she can just walk up and say, hey, Wash, something important happened and I need to talk to you for like 2 seconds. Because making a scarecrow apparently takes up all of the time. Again, contrived. She lies to Henry when being dropped off for something to go and meet Wash in the woods, then procrastinates on talking to him after making out. After hanging out for some time and drifting out, Naomi finally tells Wash that Henry doesn't see her as a daughter, and Wash says, quote, "More like a slave, I'd say, and I should know. It's in my blood, that knowledge. I know a thing about taking for granted, about folks feeling like they've got a right to their meanness." And then she chickens out about telling him what she meant so that they can bang. Naomi then goes through letters from her grandmother and grandfather, and she learns that her grandpa has bumped his head and is now having seizures. Also, they know that Henry is interested in marrying Naomi, and they have given a blessing. She urges Naomi to marry Henry for a better life for her and the twins. They should be with their father, Grandma says, as if Naomi is doing anything against that right now. She also mentions that she'd married her husband when she was just 14 and he was 28, and acts like that age gap is the only problem with marrying your father. Why does anyone in this book think that this is normal? I don't think it's historically accurate for Texas in 1938 to be like, yeah, marrying your dad is just fine. It's still grooming, bitch. So she runs off to meet Wash and tell him about the proposal for real this time, and this makes Wash suspicious of what's going on in that house, and he asks if Henry has ever abused Naomi. She says when her mom was alive, he came to her for sexual favors because her mom was sick and couldn't have sex with him anymore. Then one day she bit her dad while they were doing the oral, and so he stopped coming to her and went back to the mom, and that's what got mom pregnant in a way that ultimately got mom killed. She says she doesn't want to marry Henry, but she is stuck with him, his rape, and his offspring. Wash says that he'll help. Skip to school, and Naomi tells Tommy about Henry. Tommy is like, oh, hell yeah, do it. I thought you liked someone. You had the eyes of somebody who was like in love with somebody, and I figured, your dad is a freaking hottie. I knew that you had a thing for your daddy. Skip over to Wash, thinking about how he can get them out of there. He's like, Naomi and me together would pass as colored, but with the kids, it won't make any sense. How is it a might? It's clear that she's Mexican. Is it clear that she's Mexican, or it not? Because in some cases, we're told she's black as the night and she's super dark, and in other cases we're told, oh, I don't know if you can pass, but then other places she's kicked out of whites only places. So is she or is she not? In some cases she's kicked out because she is not white, but in other cases she's worried about kids at school knowing that she is not white or catching on that she's not white, while also they're all calling her Mexican. So like, what is it here? It's just a convenience depending on how they want to victimize her at any given time. Of course, he's thinking of escaping to California. He goes to his friend's house to ask if California would be safe for a mixed couple. Then they're talking about how pretty much their only chance is to illegally slip into Mexico because the Mexican government doesn't like black people, but if you slip in illegally and mind your own business, they'll basically leave you alone. Then he is told that he might have more luck as a porter, and that's a good way to get out of town. Wash gets back to work, where he is told to check for a gas leak at the school because kids have been complaining about headaches and smells. They go to work looking around, but then skip through it, and Wash skips checking some of the areas like the basement and the second floor so that he can get home faster. This is just willful negligence, and he basically says the kids are making it up to get out of school. If it's just a white school, like who cares if all of these kids are gonna get killed later, right? Just so you know, the book never confronts the fact that actually it's true. Wash really was to blame for this because he and his cohort at the time wanted to get out of work sooner, so they didn't finish doing their job. Naomi and the twins are in the woods now, waiting for Wash to show up. He's late. Kari pushes Naomi hard to tell her and Beto more about their mother, especially about how she died. After Kari gets pissed off, Wash shows up and sends the kids away so that he can talk to Naomi about going to Mexico and what to do about Henry. Now Naomi is complaining about how Kari was being a brat and difficult and wanting things that Naomi can't give her. And they complete their plan about trying to get to Mexico and to agree to the marriage with Henry, but have to hold off until spring semester is over, until she graduates, in order to buy time and to keep Henry off her back. Then, like every other instant development out of convenience, Naomi mentions Carrie is getting so angry lately, despite how this had never been built up in any of the previous narrative. It just showed up in the scene with bothering her about info about their mother. Back at the house, Carrie goes into what's her mom's grave briefcase, the guitar case, and looks at all of the stuff that's in there. It's all stuff that Naomi has been keeping to herself. Carrie puts on her mom's shoes. Nothing happens in the scene. Now Henry is home from the rig and they have struck oil. Naomi notices that it's her mother's birthday in 3 days and wonders if Henry even remembers that. She asks Henry if he has any pictures of her mother. He says no, which is a lie because he had one in his drawer beside his bed. But she's like, okay, cool. Since you lied to me, it makes it easier for me to lie to you. So then she says that she'll marry him, but they have to wait until spring semester is over, and she wants to have a dress like her mother's. I don't understand why Naomi was the one to bring this up when she'd already said no, and she just could have left it as a no until Henry brought it up later, and then she could have said yes. But she is the one springboarding this into the next phase when she didn't have to. Again, there's no reason behind this. You should be able to read the motives of the character choices, but because there are no character choices and these characters are just puppets to the author, doing what the author wants at any given time, there is no reason behind the actions. After Naomi agrees to marry him, Henry wants to go for a drive to celebrate. He takes her to a lookout point and she's like, I sat with my hands under my arms so that he couldn't try and hold my hand, and my burn on my arm prominently displayed because I wanted to show him how ugly I was. Nothing happens in the scene. Then summarize her going through the motions for the next who knows how long, with her just doing chores. This section is described as, this is a preview of her life in the case that her plans fail. Friggin' randomly, Carrie and Beto are doing a seance for their mother with other kids at the school. Like, we just scene skip, and we've not seen these kids do anything supernatural, not seen these kids do anything spiritual, and now they're suddenly doing a seance thinking that they're gonna see their mother. Somehow Naomi also randomly finds them in the closet that they're hiding in, and she feels violated because these kids have her mother's belongings. Carrie is like, why didn't mom leave us anything? It's not fair that you get everything. And Naomi is like, she left you me, and Carrie is like, well, I don't want you, I want mom. And Naomi is like, me too, but she was taken away when you guys came. Beto gets upset because he feels blamed for his mother's death, and Naomi is mad. There is tension that comes out of nowhere in this relationship that has literally been fine up until this point. I don't know why suddenly the author decided that she needed to do this. Of course, when we're in the last 30%, let's just randomly throw in sister hate. Somebody is probably about to die, let's be real. This section ends with, quote, Naomi followed them part way, seeing them out of the cafeteria door. Only Beto looked back, his face a plea that she could not answer. Not now. She watched from the window as they trudged along the long sidewalk, back into the main school building. Once she'd seen them go inside, she gripped the braid tight and stumbled back to the closet. The mindless mechanical ease that she'd managed was now gone. Reality settled in on her shoulders, and she felt the cruel weight of it. It was her mother's birthday. She was engaged to her stepfather. The twins hated her. The buildup is just so contrived. It's trying so hard to be dramatic and to set things up that were not set up, but there is no emotional depth in this book. The author forces it. So back into class, the twins are punished for skipping class. Carrie is now mad at Beto because he was on Naomi's side with whatever little shenanigan they just had. Naomi is thinking about how she should apologize to Carrie and Beto for making them upset, but then the explosion happens and somehow Beto is alive, but Carrie is blown to pieces. Apparently randomly forced to sit apart when they were punished for class, so Carrie is the only one that died, even though they were in literally the same room. I don't know why this author hated Carrie so much specifically in the end, other than stereotypical girl hate between current modern day authors. She made Carrie get so mean randomly, then killed her. Because every female character has to suck except Naomi. This is making me so sad. I'm so sick of every woman writer clinging to this idea that their main character being the best and every other female character has to suck and suffer and hate the main character. The girl hate is obnoxious, and it's the worst from female authors. Like, you want to talk about misogyny? I have seen no misogyny like that which I have seen from female authors in their own books towards their own female characters, where they are the goddesses and everybody else fucking sucks. Get out of my face. In some cases, this is why I can't wait to share stuff like the Yakuza characters, or in the newer case, the Westies characters, whatever they're gonna be called, because there is no superiority anything in there. You've got strong female relationships. Everybody is just so casual with the girl hatred and hating everybody and demonizing everybody, even in this bullshit. And I'm so, it makes me upset at this point. Everything is sexualized or denigrating to women. Everything. And women are the worst at it. So now that the school has exploded, they're recovering bodies, trauma. Henry shows up at the school. Wash has already removed Carrie from the classroom and taken her somewhere else for Naomi and Beto to have the recovered body. Henry returns home after looking for his kids. Naomi is still in dirty, bloody clothing. Beto's sleeping. Carrie's body is on the table with a blanket over it. Henry is angry that Wash was the one to save the kids or to unbury his daughter. He punches something and then he's leaving, asking what the frick Wash was even doing at the kids' school, because apparently he doesn't know that Wash works at the school, or that, you know, the entire community gathered together to go and dig out people from the school since it's such a small community. It's so fucking dumb. Flashback to Wash holding Carrie and Beto when they were brought home because we need more sulking misery in this stupid book. Then he's out at the school again, thinking of once he's done helping, he's gonna go return to Naomi and help her because she is upset, obviously. A couple of white men approach Wash and assume that he knew what happened with the explosion and think he's suspicious, lecture him about touching white kids. He's pulled out of there and he heads over to see Naomi. The pastor comes by. Carrie is still on the table, though she has been washed now and she's cleaned up. I don't know how she's whole since other body parts were blown apart, but Naomi is alive, but mostly whole enough that she's not like bleeding out all over the table, I guess. Oh, Henry comes into the room to greet the pastor because the pastor has made this house visit to see Henry. Henry asks if his daughter is in heaven, and the pastor is like, I mean, she was 8 or 9, but so she might be in hell. Like, we don't know what was in her heart of hearts, so she could be in hell right now, Henry. And I'm just like, who makes a house visit to a man with a dead child to literally be like, oh, you're drunk? Yeah, your daughter is probably in hell, fuck you. Like, what is this, Ashley? The audacity of this author. Don't ever talk to me about representation of anything ever again, because holy fucking shit. It's because the disrespect in this book for literally everyone involved. The author can't stop sucking for 2 seconds to be a real writer. So after the pastor runs off, Henry goes, it's all right now. He won't darken our doorway ever again. Get the fuck out of here. Dude was on your side until he wasn't. The author is an asshole. So now Henry is seeking comfort in Naomi and she runs away because she doesn't want him. We have a funeral to think of. And he goes, but this matters now more than ever. Don't you see? Henry calls. Naomi and Beto are sad. Naomi and Beto are so sad that they can't move. Naomi and Wash then get together to have sex. That's another thing. There's no actual emotional support or strong relationship or partnership shown in this relationship, and it spurred on 2 months ago. She moved in with her stepfather in September. Wash gives her a ring in December after they've had sex, and most of their scenes are just skimmed over and they're meeting to have sex. They don't talk, they don't give each other support, they don't really do anything for one another except it's entirely sex, and you don't get to see them working together as a team or falling in love, so to call this a love story is a cheap lie. You go immediately from infatuation when he finds her shoe and she's in a tree to she is so freaking hot to she's worth waiting for to I want to bang her to marriage. Come on. So they're just going on with life now, planning their escape and the funeral services. Beto is depressed anytime he's separated from his sister's body that's still on the table. No one is doing anything to help this kid more and he's just being ignored as he literally sits on the table with his dead sister. Henry snaps at Beto to help him with the coffin for Carrie, you know, as everyone ignores how Beto is doing it with his dead twin sister. And then of course Henry can't even make a fucking coffin because Henry can't do anything. Naomi encourages Henry to go and call somebody about making a coffin, and eventually he has to call Wash because of course Wash makes up for everything that Henry cannot do. Again, like typical lazy romance tropes, you have the consistent comparison between Henry and Wash where Henry fails and Wash is good at everything. To add insult to injury, they bring up the failed coffin and ask if Wash can fix it. He tells Henry that no, it's better to just start from scratch because it's, for time's sake, it's better to just remove any touch of Henry from everything. So Henry leaves the job to Wash and then drives off. Wash makes the casket and it's perfect. Now the body is buried. Naomi sees Wash and he says that he's been too busy to get the tickets for them to leave town, even though they know that their time is cutting it short and they don't have too much of a reason to stay. He's procrastinating for plot reasons. You can't even take it seriously that he feels bad about it because he's thinking about how disgusted he is seeing Henry hold Naomi's hand during the funeral and like how much she has to give up to pretend that she's okay with that. Dude, if you cared so much about the situation that Naomi was in, you would have gotten those tickets already and you wouldn't let her sit in that situation longer. Montage on through the town being in mourning so that you can just hear everyone is so sad and drinking and coping and working and eating casserole, but none of this matters. None of them matter. The author just pushed this montage onto the page for passage of time and what, Wash is doing nothing during all of this time so that, again, we're wasting more time when they could be escaping from this town. They're now discovering there was a gas leak and how no one was alerted, and if they did, they said that it was fine that there was a gas leak in the school. Everyone asks if there's anyone that can be held accountable for the explosion and all of the dead kids, but since it was caused by ignorance, nobody can be blamed. The townspeople are angry and want to take it out on somebody. The mob are determined to blame the oil tycoon rich man because he didn't pay for whatever service they wanted to be had on the heater unit at the school or whatever that exploded. Then Miranda comes outside just to tell them that Wash was at fault for the explosion. Look at how he acted and how after that meeting he said that it would take an explosion to make the riches see the problems. This is so lazy, because even in the scene where Wash said that, there was no explanation of Miranda being there, how she overheard that, if they even saw her, nothing. It's just like, oh, hee, let me just insert it in this scene in order to derive the plot in a specific direction. Get out. Also, this is where Miranda comes in with her evil woman entrance and laughter. Quote, "I know something more. The voice was high and thin and nearly swallowed up by the night, but it took us only a moment to place it. Miranda stepped out on the porch in a nightgown and wrapper. Her forehead was still bandaged and her face was bruised and scratched, but knowing her, we figured that what had pained her the most was being alone. No one to echo her petty remark or round out her laughter. Her followers were mostly buried now. Miranda was not one to bear the pain of going unheard." So after Miranda tells the mob to go after Wash, they show up at Henry's house specifically to pick him up to go and lynch Wash, though they don't say that that's what they're doing. He knows something like that is going to go down, and he tells Beto to come with him because he wants to make Beto into a man. Meanwhile, Naomi thinks nothing of it, even though you would think that she knows better when people are coming in the middle of the night. She's just like, meh, I'll just start packing shit to start running away. Switch over to Wash as he goes to their special tree to leave a note that he's got the tickets, but he forgot a freaking notepad. His parents are arguing about bailing on town because the city folk are mad and want to take it out on Wash. Wash returns home and his parents are arguing about fleeing because the town folk are coming, and Dad doesn't want to leave because they'll look guilty anyway, but they've determined they are going to leave. Dad finds out that Wash has stolen money from him and tells Wash to go and get the money back. Wash promises that's what he's going to do, but what he really did was spend that money on tickets for him and Naomi and Beto. He says he's going to go and get the money back for his dad. He's actually on his way to the tree to wait for Naomi or to write that note for Naomi. On his way to the tree, though, he runs into the lynch mob. Henry forces Beto to participate in throwing rocks and terrorizing Wash and his whole family. Beto eventually runs off. Meanwhile, we have a section of Naomi waiting at the tree while thinking of life that she's about to have, you know, the fantasizing. So then you've got the mixture of this terrorizing and racism, along with Naomi being like, the life that I could have. And over here, Wash is getting beat up. And over here, Beto is running to the pastor's house to go and get the pastor to try to stop the terrorizing. Eventually, Beto gets to the tree and finds Naomi and tells her what was happening to Wash. Actually, he screams Wash's name, and Naomi realizes what's going on, so then she runs over to see Wash and try to help him, but by the time she gets to Wash's house, it's on fire, and there are bodies hanging from the trees out there, lynched, so she runs back to the sex tree and hides in the sex tree with Beto, where they cry and fall asleep. When she wakes up, she hears Wash's voice, and it turns out that the people hanging in the trees were actually the scarecrows from his mother's garden. The house was on fire, however, Wash is fine. Wash, Beto, and Naomi head back to go and find Wash's parents because they're all going to get in the car and flee. Wash's parents are arguing about whether or not they can actually make it because they see Naomi and they're like, you're dating a white chick? How could you date a white chick? It's going to get you killed. But then immediately, like in the next scene with his parents, his mom is like, well, she could pass as black, but not those kids. Those kids couldn't pass as black. So it confuses whether or not what Naomi looks like. They all just decide to leave. They go and they get in the car and they're going to be they're driving away. Beto doesn't want to leave yet because they left his cat back at Henry's house, and if they leave the town and leave the cat, then he knows that Henry is going to kill the cat because Henry has threatened to kill the cat a couple of times. So Naomi offers to go back to Henry's house to get the cat, and she's also going to grab her mother's things with the guitar case. Now back at the house, Henry is sleeping, drunk, but he does hear that one tiny little that it makes a sound when Naomi steps on just the right wooden platform that it screeches. So then he's woken up from his dead drunken stupor and chases her out the front door, and as she climbs into the truck with Wash's parents, he grabs her by the leg and he's got his shotgun and he's like, you're gonna get out of the fucking car and you're gonna come with me, and so are you, child, and so are you, black kid. So then he takes all of them and the parents drive off because Wash says, just leave without me, it's gonna be fine. So then Dad takes Beto and Wash and Naomi into the woods where he has Beto tie Wash to a tree, and then he rapes his daughter in front of them and is like, quote, look son, now I'm gonna show you another side of what it means to be a man. What do you do with a field you own? You plow it. He walked over to Naomi. Lie down, he told her. So there's that, and he's like, if you don't behave yourself, then I'm going to shoot Wash. But he threatens to shoot Wash anyway at the end of everything. Oh my gosh, during this whole thing. So they're in the woods and he's walking Wash to the tree. And Dad puts his shotgun onto his back and none of them try to fight him while he's not armed. They just still obey. Even though they know this is the end and you need to do something, especially while he's got his gun put away, they don't even try. So after Dad is done raping Naomi, he gives Beto a pistol and says, you're going to execute Wash or I'm going to shoot your sister. Build this up into Henry shoots both Wash and Naomi because they're on top of each other after Henry has already beaten the shit out of Wash. And then Beto loses his temper and shoots Henry. And as Naomi and Wash are sitting there dying on the ground together, like they're smiling at each other and it's fetishizing their suffering with, quote, they lay together for a moment in their brokenness. His hand found hers. Like, it builds up this romance between them and this daydreaming of the life that they could have had, that they were going to have, that they were running away together while holding their hands and dying in each other's arms. And it's so romantic and sweet and sad. It's not. It's fetishizing suffering is what it's doing. So then Wash's parents show up and take Beto, and then they run off, and then they end up in San Antonio where Grandpa and Grandma are. You know, the ones that Naomi was not willingly going to on her own. And they're all just living fine. So this could have been the resolve the whole time over there. Beto is then successful in everything that he does. He's top of his class. He's got fellowships and scholarships to go to school for free. And then he decides at the end of the book, he is going to write a book of the true story of what happened in New London. And there's a call to action, quote, before the terrible price was exacted for their transgressions, for the crossing of lines, for friendship, for love. And so he worked, piecing together memories, imagining what he could not have known, writing out the ruins of his former life. He wrote until the story was there outside him, terrible in its truth. He needs you, reader. All he asks is that you take the story and carry it for a while. The strange song gathered out of darkness. So this book ends literally calling for action from the reader after saying, oh, by the way, so what happened in New London, it was in the papers as a completely fabricated story that just demonized the minorities and then ended with Beto telling the truth about everything. And hey, reader, go and tell more people that this is real life. So this story itself is all manipulation. Garbage, and ends with another call to action to the readers. And that's the end of the book. For the record, compared to any of the other books, this book was published in 2016 and it feels like a major grift. I had questions about the historical accuracy of any of this. It did not feel like there was no scene setting in this book for 1937, 1936. Like, it did nothing to create setting. It did nothing to tell me if they were in a small town, if they were in a big town, if they were in a very close-knit community, in a growing community. They were obviously in an oil rig community, and that was the excuse as to why nobody cared if they were coming in or out. But if it was such a small community, then they would care about people coming in or out because of the time period. And this was what, after the Dust Bowl, during the Depression, where kids were being kidnapped constantly in order to get ransoms because people were making that a job around the time of the Depression. But you had bandits and outlaws and hoodlums and drifters, people coming in and out of the communities. So saying, oh, nobody was paying attention to them because people were coming in and out for the oil rigs, people would be caring because it was a close-knit community, right? This isn't a good representation of anything because everything is so exaggerated to the extreme. All of the good characters are just fundamentally good, and then their sacrifice is like the savior sacrifice, and then everybody else is just bad. There was constant contradiction, not just between whether or not Naomi was seen as as Mexican or as white. But then you also had stuff where they were all encouraging her to marry her stepdad. And then when she agreed to marry her stepdad, she was like, but we have to keep it a secret because people will think that it's weird, Dad. We can't tell anybody. Literally everybody in this book up to that point was saying, hey, yeah, that's fine. Again, I don't think that is also historically accurate for the culture of the time where you marry the daughter that you raised since she was 5 years old. It felt like a political hit job on Texas, to be honest with you. The number of tropes in this book was jarring for how highly rated it is. With her character being a Mary Sue, like for real. With her main character being a Mary Sue that everybody wants to have sex with the miscommunication. There's also, again, there is no plot to this story. None of these characters want anything. None of these characters are trying to become something. You would at least think, with the tension that is within Naomi's household, that she would be trying to accomplish something. But we're just jumping between perspectives with literally nobody trying to do anything, with no drive forward. And so it's just figment, suffering, not suffering. Here's just these people meeting each other to have sex and be cute for like 20-30% of the book for nothing. I'm getting so sick of these books where there is no drive. It is just authors rolling in their own, they think they're brilliant. They think they're compassionate. That's what it feels like. The switching perspectives of this book didn't work for me. It also just kind of switched to be like, look at that gross person. If it was Henry or if it was the gang, it was to talk about how great Naomi was and how much everyone wanted to have sex with her, or how much they all hated Miranda. That's literally the only reason it switched perspectives. This book also took a risk in starting with the explosion because in some cases, from a craft perspective, then that leaves you with the tension of when is it going to explode? Who is it going to kill? Especially when you get to the introduction of Naomi and Wash, and then you're like, are they going to be in that explosion or not? So now you're just waiting for it to happen so you can see who knows. But then when you start that way, you also tell the reader that the story is pointless and everybody is going to die. So it's a double-edged sword. Depending on how well you do it, it will motivate or demotivate your reader. The characterizations in this book were so bad for me because the author hates their own characters. The characterizations in this book was so bad to me. The author hates her own characters, so she can't be bothered to invest in any of them. We're told that Henry wants his kids to admire him and other people to admire him, but we see him do literally nothing to get that admiration and is just drunk all the time and is threatening his kids. So you have to at least do something to show this character that you're telling me that he is. But you can't be bothered because you hate him so much. You don't even want to show that. There is nuance. A lot of the story felt like, just believe me, bro. Like when it's, oh, here's this racism. Oh, they don't want the Mexican girl to marry the black guy. Why? Why does any of it matter? It would have kept her away from Gilbert. Why would Miranda have sabotaged that if she could be like, oh yeah, go be with that guy, and it'll make her so detestable to all of the white people if they're so racist? She would have been shooting for, oh yeah, she's totally being plowed by that black guy. There was no exploration or nuance or understanding behind Henry's racism. With how Henry was, I don't understand how Beto was even named Roberto or even could go by Beto instead of being named Robert or Bobby. How he even married a Latino woman to the level that he did, where he is obviously so racist, or is his sexual attraction to Latinas so much more than his racism towards Latinas? Is that what we're supposed to go for? Is this fetishizing of the Latinas? Because then why would he be so open about marrying them? The author straight up outs herself at the end, saying that she exaggerated and removed the fact that most communities would safeguard against mobs in the case of tragedy, and that she instead imagined if that didn't happen. This alone is enough to make this book not be taught in schools because it is not historically accurate and it is claiming to be a historical learning event. She's trying to rewrite history by manipulating emotions because people don't remember facts, they remember how they were made to feel. Quote, The 1937 New London school explosion ravaged a community about 10 miles from my hometown. It is still on the record as the deadliest school disaster in the United States. With the exception of the explosion, the tragedy that unfolds in this novels are products of my imagination. Still, they are generally consistent with documented occurrences in other parts of Texas and the South during the 1930s. There is considerable historical precedence for racism, sexual abuse, violence against minorities, and other distressing facets of life portrayed in the novel. An understandable protective impulse sometimes inspires efforts to conceal, diminish, and disavow such painful histories. The work of this book, however, was to bring to light experiences and narratives that might otherwise go unacknowledged. I have tried to balance the heartbreak, cruelty, and ignorance of my character's world with profound attention to the forms of kindness and connection that are also possible in it. Factual details catalyzed some of my imagination. For example, I learned that mounted Texas Rangers were sent to the homes of school board members where they succeeded at diffusing threats of violence. The information caused me to consider what might have happened to a potential scapegoat not afforded this kind of protection. The relative absence of historical information about the African American community in East Texas during the oil boom left me wondering how might the school explosion have been felt by families whose children were spared precisely because they had been denied access to the state-of-the-art New London school. Similarly, when I discovered that at least one of the children killed in New London explosion was likely Hispanic, although her family may well have downplayed the background as the twins and Naomi are encouraged to, I began to consider what might have brought a Latino family to a primarily black and white community in the 1930s. East Texas. The educational experience of Naomi, Wash, and the twins allowed me to incorporate glimpses of the tripartite segregation system present in Texas before the Civil Rights Movement, a system that separated children into white, colored, and Mexican schools. Look, bad things happened in the past. I'm not saying that they didn't, but taking events, exaggerating them, lying about them, turning every character into a stereotype of stock evil or stock good, and selling it as historical because you took inspiration from a historical event to make characters of evil and innocence is malicious. And you want to force this into a learning environment and tell kids that this was the reality. You are lying. There is no way around it from the way that this book is defended by the author and the way that she talks about it herself. And I'm sick of people thinking they are entitled to lie and manipulate and rewrite history because they have good reasons for it. Now you can see why I'm so pissed off at this fucking book. And my final note. In some interviews about this book and other books like it, the author defenders of these books say that they need to be in middle schools in order to help kids in similar situations. I ask how and where. Nowhere in modern America is like this book. Let alone, this book ends with 3 homicides and an orphan. Naomi and Wash are both stupid and procrastinators in a life or death situation. They see the danger and they ignore it. There is nothing in this book to help anyone in a similar situation, and that is the biggest disgrace of it all. This book did not have to be sad. This book did not have to be tragedy porn, misery porn, disturbing all of the characters here. It could have been a moving story about these two people who found each other in this terrible situation where they felt both like outcasts, grew together, actually built this family of love and compassion with the twins, and found a way to succeed and get out of this and be happy together. It didn't have to be sad. The problem is with these books, all of them, in this category, is it has to sell misery, it has to sell pain, it has to sell hopelessness so that it can call upon action from you. Because if it says that there is hope in the future, then you don't have to do anything. If it says that there is no hope in the future and you are always going to be a suffering victim unless you do something right now, then it is manipulating you into action. Because it is selling you on false victimhood forever. It's telling you that in your lifetime, you will never be successful. You can never have success. But maybe if you fight for your life right now where everything sucks, then maybe somebody after you can have life. But you are going to have a sucky life forever. Fuck you. That's what these books sell, which is why none of them can have happy endings. Which is why everybody is so depressed now. Nobody apparently can write a happy story anymore that is realistic. Nobody can write a YA story that has a happy, loving family, but still has them working together with trauma and tension and good storytelling. It all has to be this. And I don't know exactly why this story specifically got my goat, but it did. I haven't been this pissed off specifically about any of the books at the ALA so far until this one. I mean, they've all been annoying, and I go, how is this even an argument? But this book specifically made me angry. And it got me angry again while I was reading my synopsis. because everything is wrong with it, and I suffered through it. I don't know how Ashley Hope got away with this, and now I just kind of want to cry. I hate it so much. The cry is frustration, because I had to deal with this, and now it's in my head. I hope I saved you from having to read this stupid book, but if you end up reading it, good luck. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Have you read it? Will you read it? What are your thoughts on anything and everything involved with this book? That said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out? The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?